Dr. Daniel Kimbley. I'm very excited for this conversation. Just having recently been connected through mutual friend, but just right away, I think both you and I were tracking in our conversation that we had before deciding to hop on the podcast. Today, we're talking about your success mindset, and one of the things that really stood out to me was the language that you use to describe what you do. Because frankly, although you have a different expression of what you're doing, I felt very aligned when I heard you describing
Yeah.
how to live with more presence, passion, purpose, and power. And the way that you have been called to, chosen to both express that is the Nexus Family Chiropractic
Yep.
Center, which is really to me so much more than what somebody thinks about when they think about chiropractic care, which I want to get into, that you and your wife founded. And I am so excited to hear more about that journey, the stories, and some of the practicals of how somebody who is really focused, they're high functioning, high performing, and really wanting to take their life to the next level, but maybe experienced a bit of, that moment of a plateau or hitting a stall or even just a crisis
Yep.
like we all encounter at different times, how they can think about that from the standpoint of your perspective, what you see and do daily, and how God has helped you understand how to live by design. So, really quick, it doesn't need to be quick. I'd love to hear a little bit more about just maybe a quick introduction of where you are, how long you've been doing your, what I'll call like your mission
hmm
that you're on right now, and how that started. And we can take it from any direction. But that's the starting point for me is where are you and how long have you been doing what you're doing?
Well, before I'm honored to be here, TJ. So one, thank you. Yeah, I love that you said, we haven't known each other very long. One of the things that I already appreciate about you is you have a much slower pace than me, and it forces me to slow down and like actually be present because sometimes I just go. So dude, just I say that all to say like you're amazing and what I do know about you right now, and I'm just honored to be here and have this conversation. So first off, thank you. And God, He's the master of orchestrating all this, and there are no coincidences. So praise God for bringing us together. Yeah, man. So, there's so many pieces to my story, and I always tell the long version of it, but I think where I kind of want to go and ask whatever questions you want, I'll give you as much as you want, is I had this belief from the time I was very, very young that the body knew how to heal itself. And an example would be like when I was in high school, I was a big time partier, used lots of drugs, drank a lot. But one of the things that always held true is like my friends would be like, if you have a headache, just take a Tylenol. And I'm like, I don't need that. My body knows how to heal itself. So I had this like very like cognitive dissonance between like, I'll put any chemical in my body, but at the same time, the body knows how to heal itself. And like those two didn't seem to mesh. And I was teaching high school English and I was very passionate about the brain. Long story short, I'm skipping a lot of the details. You can ask me to fill in the gaps if you would like, but I basically got out of teaching. I quit and went into chiropractic because I felt like chiropractic was a much faster, quicker route to affect someone's brain. And so I kind of always had this belief that the body knew how to heal itself. We all have the same potential to be successful. And that led me to this place of being able to provide the chiropractic care that we now provide for clients and people all over the country. And it's just been awesome and such a journey of God to just realize like what he put in us is amazing and our own healing capability comes from nowhere else but how he designed us, which is awesome. So that's like I know that we could go a million different places from
We're
that, but
gonna take it a million
we'll
directions.
start there.
Maybe I'll
Yeah.
hone us in here. Okay, so number one, so you're out of Dana Point, California,
Mm-hmm.
Southern
Yep.
California. You had, from what I understand and what you just shared, maybe several awakenings along the way,
Oh yeah.
right? And those led you to the place of saying, "This is more than just a something that I have intuitively
hmm
that tells me my body can heal. There must be something greater that's in me to
Yep.
unlock in my potential to not just know my body heals, but activate that and help
Yeah.
other people with it.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to share a quick thing that I'm reminded of by that statement. You've always had this understanding that the body is designed to heal. I was told once that any doctor will tell you that they didn't heal you when you come out of surgery,
Yep.
right? They performed the surgery and maybe removed whatever it was that shouldn't have been there, but
Mhm.
they can't heal you. Your
Yep.
body has to heal itself. And they, by performing the surgery, supported the body's ability to heal by removing whatever it was. And I'm talking in this example, maybe it were cancerous or something like that.
Sure. Yeah.
I had reconstructive shoulder surgery when I was maybe 13 years old. And the doctor who performed that surgery was a family friend and did an excellent job. But they went in thinking it was going to be maybe 30 minutes an hour. I don't know what the typical number is. It was like 4.5, 5 hours, something crazy.
Wow.
Okay, so my shoulder, he helped my shoulder heal. He couldn't heal my shoulder.
Yep.
I had to go through the process of healing. And to this day, I'm very grateful I had the surgery because it was so messed up. But at the same time, I'm also so grateful that my body was able to heal.
Mhm.
And what I hear from you is that you really care about supporting the body in its ability to heal through a very specific means, non-surgical, and even from what I've read and heard, actually uh, I would say no popping,
Yep.
cracking, snapping, or violent aggressive acts of a chiropractor uh, that somebody might expect. So tell me a little bit about that. We can take it a couple different routes, but tell me a little bit about that and even how that came to uh, be something that you wanted to pursue.
Yeah. So, when I was teaching, I started learning about the brain, and the more I learned, I kind of like my wife, who is now my wife, wasn't at the time. She's the one who introduced me to a chiropractor. So, like, a little tiny bit of the backstory is I had this realization that when I started getting care for myself, chiropractic care, I just had this newfound like passion, sense of purpose, more motivation. I couldn't really explain why. And my chiro was like, dude, he's like, it's because we're waking up your brain. And I was like, wait, but I'm teaching and I'm trying to use these teaching strategies to like wake up these kids' brains. And that sounds weird to say wake up that way, but I'll explain it in a second. So I got to the point where I'm like, I just need to teach this principle to whole families, but I have no authority to do it as an English teacher. So I'm like, what would be the thing? And it ended up, so quit my job teaching. I was on the route to administration, kind of like maxed out where I was, got a job offer to go into admin, quit the next day, moved to chiropractic school. And my whole thing was like, I wanted to tell people the truth about how their bodies function. And, this is before I was a believer, but now I'd be like, how perfectly God made us and how much potential is in this thing that we have that he gave us. If only we could express it. And things like there are pieces in the Bible that talk about, there's a reason I think the Bible says, do not fear so many times because stress physiology, fear physiology dampens our ability to express that full potential. And I'll talk about that because this gets into the chiropractic piece. So going through school, I was obsessed with learning. I wanted to know more about the brain and like why the brain and what is it? Because chiropractors, everybody thinks it's a back thing, but the back is really just one of the ways I would describe it is it's a big sensor that feeds information to your brain. And so if you think of your brain like a muscle, it gets most of its workout from movement of the joints of the spine. So there's a whole physiology involved. But I learned that the pop or the crack doesn't matter because I can pop my own neck. And I popped my own neck before I ever saw a chiropractor. I noticed no changes in my motivation, no changes in my purpose. So, like, there had to be something that was different. And the difference is with very specific inputs to the spine, based on a series of neurological tests that we do in my practice, we can target parts of the brain that are weaker parts of the brain that need to be strengthened or parts of the brain that may be overactive and start to calm some of those. So we're measuring the brain, and the reason that I say the popping cracking doesn't matter is because the speed is what matters. So we have all these little tiny muscles around our spine, rotatories, multifidi, the nerdy sciencey stuff. But those are actually, if you pulled apart and you separated them into two piles, we have muscle fibers and then we have proprioceptors or sensors that just feed information to the brain. They're more proprioceptors than they are muscle fibers if you pulled each of them apart. So their job is not, they're not muscular. They're meant to feed information to the brain. So we do these very specific adjustments with no popping cracking because at a certain speed, we know that the adjustments that we're doing to the spine is what stimulates the brain. So we can talk about cerebellum and frontal cortex, and cortex is kind of what I nerd out on because that's the success part of the brain. Um, and that's, that's like a very general overview. I could get way more nitty gritty into the details of it.
Well, I want to
Um,
pause real quick
yeah,
on this if I can,
yeah, please.
because ultimately I want people to understand what they can know for their success mindset. And here's where I think there's so much alignment, and that maybe is no pun intended, but there's a lot of alignment here. Um, since becoming a dad, my dad jokes are just really another level. Um, but what I'm hearing, and this is so interesting to me, I read a book when I was in my late 20s that helped me understand why I was facing so much indecision, fear of making
Mhm.
certain decisions. And one of the things that's interesting to me in some of the success stories that I've read about and watched with you is that, and I wrote it down. Fear wasn't as big as what it used to be,
Yep,
as an kind of a surprising outcome of time spent with you. And frankly, that's one of the mile markers of progress that a lot of people I'm working with experience
yep,
for maybe different. Maybe they have a different way of getting there because 2 + 2 = 4, but so does 1 + 3 and 0 + 4. They all
yeah,
equal 4, but there's different ways to get to the same thing. And that same thing, I believe, is a renewed mind.
yep,
And there's a physical aspect to that completely because we're spirit, soul, body, and the mind sits in the soul level. And so there's a renewed mind piece, but the physiology of that, the biology of that is so real. And when I read this book in my late 20s, I learned that, especially in men, your prefrontal cortex is really starting to develop in your 20s and 30s.
yeah,
Women, maybe a little earlier, from
yep,
what I understand.
100%, you're right.
Right?
Yep,
And so what that means though is your risk and reward understanding changes.
mhm,
So why am I not making certain decisions? I hear this from 38-year-olds, 35-year-olds. Why am I not as carefree as when I was in my early 20s, blah, 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 blah.
yep,
And they don't take into account what I read in my late 20s, which it sounds like you're going to maybe help me understand and dive into more. The fact that when your prefrontal cortex is developing, that risk reward center is developing, you really start to take into account kind of the fear factor or risk level of making a decision.
mhm,
And people who have what I would call maybe trauma brain, which by the
mhm,
way, we've all experienced some form of trauma, something that happens in a given amount of time we don't have time to process.
yep,
Okay, that could be small, big, whatever it is, and we don't heal properly, a word that I hear you using a lot, whether it's on your website, in a video, just hearing you talk. I mean, healing is so important, and putting your body in a state to heal is so important. From what I understand, a trauma brain is going to be black and white thinking, a lot of fear driven thinking, a lot of risk, 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 but the reward never really seems worth it. A lot of, I don't know if I can do it. What
yeah.
happens if then the other thing? So, how do you, let me ask you two questions now. One, do you hear this and see this from people coming into, because there's high performing people experience exactly what I'm talking about. This is not for
Mhm,
people who are just kind of like sitting on their couch going, life stinks.
yep,
Like, this is for people who are like, wait, I've been so high performing my whole life. Why am I just now hitting this wall? Or why am I plateauing? I got to this level, I can't get to the next one. Do you hear this from people? And what's your response, your perspective on that challenge that they might be facing?
Yeah, so I think there's 2 things, and the first one, arguably the most important, that the more stress that we have, the less likely that our faith, hopeful, optimistic part of the brain, which is the prefrontal cortex, is turned off or weakened. So stress hormones specifically weaken the frontal cortex. So if I like to think of the frontal cortex as that it's like the ultimate turn down the volume button. So if I have fear, if my frontal cortex is strong, it can say, no, 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 we don't need to worry about that right now. Let's continue. And so, a lot of times I'll see people where they're just beat down with stress, whether it's like super successful business owners or someone who's had like, man, unimaginable trauma, like anywhere in the spectrum, it doesn't necessarily matter. But the more stress that we have that we leave unchecked, the weaker that frontal cortex is going to get. And our brain by design is going to operate more like a fear protective scarcity state. And so it's interesting because it like it goes 2 ways. Is like, yes, as a younger male, we're going to make more risky decisions. But also as we get older, if it continues to gets weaker and weaker, we might lose motivation, or feel like hopeless and stuck. And so it kind of just shows up as different emotions at the older that we get, but it's the same, in my opinion, it's all the same symptom, which is that just weakened prefrontal cortex. And what I love to really like bridge the gap is that if we think about from you talked about spirit, soul, body, um, the brain, the frontal cortex, among many other things, is responsible for faith, hope, and optimism. And so we can really, like the way I look at the work that we do with people is like we're just connecting them back to what God initially designed us with. But those stress hormones weaken the part of the brain that's responsible for that faith, hope, optimism. And so that's really where I see this connection of like, okay, what happens when we're younger versus what happens when we're older, and why sometimes we lose that motivation to like really go after the next thing. And I work with people like that all the time, you know?
Yeah, so and what I'm hearing you say, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm hearing you say is, you know, one could look at the whole development of the brain and go, well, it's just because I'm getting older and that's what happens in the
Hmm.
development of the brain. So then that's what I have to deal with. And maybe my risk management, reward thinking, hope optimism fades a little bit just because I'm getting older. But what you're telling me is no, not necessarily. When you experience more of life by default in the world we live in, your stress load is going to increase responsibilities, more likelihood of experiencing loss, other things,
Yeah.
in addition to development of the brain and risk reward thinking.
Hmm.
So you have to be intentional about how to support your body and
Yeah.
to really support or make an effort to connect with that faith, hope, optimism
Hmm.
part of the brain. Tell me how you think about that, do that practically. Like, what are some practicals for you?
Yeah, so I think like the practicals for me are, I mean, obviously one is going to be getting adjusted. And so I just go back to like, some of the most simplistic sayings, like everyone's heard straw that broke the camel's back. But we don't think about literally what that means. So it's not, I just drop the hay bale. It's like one straw and then the next straw, and they're all seemingly insignificant and they add up to this big, huge collapse eventually. So for me, it's like, all right, what would we do to mitigate that? And I think I'm obviously very biased, but like outside of getting adjusted, one of the most important practices that I've spent is like, if you look at the word, like there's a reason the Bible says, do not fear so many times. Because we know that fear literally hijacks what this decision making machine is like very, very capable of. Um, and that's a lot of what I think, like what you saw in the documentary or the trailer, is some of these people saying like fear wasn't as big of an issue in my life anymore. Yeah, because you're more connected to what God wanted us to be, what the Bible literally tells us to be. I was reading 2 Timothy 1 verse 7 today. It's like we are not made to be fearful. We're made to be loving, sound mind, which just means have some more self-control, all frontal cortex stuff. So we can kind of tie this like, spiritual with a very physical body, flesh. But anyway, so practical for me is like one, just spending time in the word. And I think that it just gives us, like, to me, there's such a paradigm of how to live, and I think that operating from that space makes it that much easier to go through the day to day, to know that, like, a lot of the burdens that we carry, we just don't have to. And that's like the covenant that I don't know how, like, scriptural you wanna go, but, like, the covenant that Jesus made with us is like, "I will die for your sins so you no longer have to bear them." Just gives like a it's such a relief. But I think we forget that, and we get caught up in the, like, the lifestyle and work and getting the kids from point A to point B and, like, all the things that we have to deal with. So just remembering is, like, some of the stuff we just don't have to burden or carry on our own. Um, Jesus did the heavy lifting for us. Doesn't take away our responsibility, but it just makes it easier, you know? So that's really a big one for me. And then the other I would say is this being in solitude and allowing myself to be bored or just like think about things. Whether it's a problem or whether it's a just zone out and just be grateful for the things that I have, but like no phone, no book, no music, and just sit and like I try to do that for 30 minutes a day. I did not do that today, and it's probably part of the reason why I feel like a little bit more chaotic than normal. Um, but I think like those are just some really practical regulation tips that center me and you can look at, if you look at the research and look at like what does praying do? What does solitude do? What does breath work do? You could get into a million different things, but they're all stimulating. It's all frontal cortex stuff. And that's really, outside of adjusting, I think those are just very practical things that anybody can do with just a little bit of commitment.
Yeah, it's so funny. You mentioned solitude and getting in the word. And I think about those two things. Really, the key word that stood out to me is a lot of people get this um, a little religious, is what I would
Yep.
say with this. Getting in the word. They forget what the whole part of that is.
Hmm.
You said the word remembering,
Yep.
remembering. Like, if you ask me, "What'd you eat for breakfast?" I'm like, bu 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 bu
Yeah.
let me think about this. Hold on. TJ, what were you doing right before you guys got on this podcast? Hang on, hang on, hang on, hang on. Right?
Yeah.
So there's like a real value to the practical of reminding yourself of certain things in life, especially
Hmm.
truth. That's really helpful.
Yep.
And the value of that, at least on a soul level, that I can feel is a resting, like a calmness that
Yeah.
comes over me, right? And the second part of solitude, allowing myself to be bored, what a powerful statement, because there's a real fear for a lot of people to allow themselves to be bored
Hmm.
because they don't want to experience my personal experience of this and observation of others, don't want to experience depleting emotions.
Yep.
When you're in a stressed state and you've got a lot going on in your life, sitting still, being quiet, and having time to yourself to allow yourself to realize all the things going on in your life doesn't sound great. It sounds like that's a great thing to not do. And experiencing those depleting emotions, some people use the word negative. I like depleting a little bit more because it
Yeah.
seems a little bit more accurate to me, of gosh, that makes me a little depressed. Gosh, that makes me a little anxious. Gosh, that makes me feel a little bit of blank. It forces you to go, okay, how do I process that? And a lot of
Hmm.
people don't have a great way to process that. One of the ways I love, maybe I'll kind of just add on to it, is like solitude for me, and it works for a lot of people, I believe, is a great way of doing it for me is movement.
Yeah.
Because I'm kind of like you, although I may speak a little bit slower and calm myself in a little bit of ways in terms of communication. I have this brain that's going all the time. It's really hard for me to sit still, think one thought and just follow it. And, so movement practically really helps me process a lot of what you're describing in the ways of a solitude moment. Like that's been really helpful for me. So if somebody's saying, "Well, how do I do the solitude thing without sitting in my closet?" It's like, consider just getting outside and
For
walking in
sure.
the sun without anything, for 30 minutes. Like, it's that simple,
Yep. It's
right?
so well, and dude, that's I can say, like, I love that you said that because sometimes I need the reminder for myself of like, "Hey, it's been a progression," but for 3 or 4 months, that was my solitude, is walking without listening to music or a podcast. And I even for a while, like, I had my plod that I would just clip on my shirt, and I would just talk of, like, whatever came up. And I kinda, like, as I've gotten more comfortable with some of those depleting emotions and whatever comes in, it's been a progression. So I love that you said that because I think that too often it's really easy to just be like, "Well, I can't do it," and I just give up, or I could never do that. But it's so good. It's like, yeah, it can be a walk. It can be as easy as a walk with nothing in your ears.
100%.
Yeah.
When I think about success mindset, there's a like, for you, one of the things that I think you're really focused on, correct me if I'm wrong, is just a healthy functioning nervous system,
Mhm. 100%.
right? And I know we're talking about, like, the cortex of the brain and brain health, um, and some of the things I've heard is that people who've worked with you, they really found it, um, eye-opening because you were talking about things other people were not talking about. So when you think about a healthy functioning nervous system, you think about somebody who's successful and fulfilled. You think about somebody who's wanting to experience more of that presence or passion, purpose, power in their life. You think about the challenges that they might be facing because it's a crisis,
Mhm.
whether it's a crisis of faith, a crisis of relationship, a crisis in the promotion didn't give them what they thought it would, whatever it might be. And you think about how a healthy functioning nervous system can really be the game changer for them. I mean, yeah, they can do an adjustment 100%, but like, how would you help them wrap their head around it, like, in a practical way, as if we're having the conversation and I'm that person? How would you help me wrap my head around the idea of this healthy functioning nervous system as an answer? Remember, multiple ways to get to the same answer, but
For sure.
one of the answers. What would you talk about?
I mean, to me, it always goes back to if like anything that we would experience is not a mistake or a brokenness. And I think that a lot of the healing that takes place out there, it's actually really refreshing to hear you talk about the surgery and that any surgeon will say, like, we're not the one that fixed you. Cause even though they stitch you up, your body still heals the tissue, right? So I don't think a lot of people actually think that way. I think the opposite is true. If we just look at, I mean, we could just look at advertising alone. Like most of it is like, you're broken, take this thing, it will fix you and make you better. And so the biggest thing I always want people that I work with to understand, more so than whether they get adjusted, start care with me, do whatever other thing they're going to do, is understanding that any symptom, and this is a big claim, but I would argue that any symptom, whether it's lack of motivation, low testosterone, I could run the list like autoimmune issues, headaches, physical pain, it doesn't matter. Those are normal, built in, God given responses to abnormal amount of stress in the system. So they're protective. And my question all that I ask people is I'm like, do you want to like would you want to take away something if it was actually keeping you protected and safe? We just want to wake up the system so that the system doesn't feel like it needs to keep you safe and protected in those ways any longer. So, to give a simple example is like think about an autoimmune issue. Someone just has so much inflammation that their body starts attacking itself. The inflammation is a normal God given response because if we were cavemen and I had a bear attacking me and I got cut open, I want inflammation in my bloodstream ready to protect the site of the wound. But chronic long term, it's detrimental to our health. So many things are like that where it's like these are normal responses. It's not that you're broken, you don't need fixed. Your body's trying to protect itself using the tools that it has. and, there's an environmental piece of it as well. So that's the way that I help people wrap their head around. It's not that you need fixed because you're not broken. It's just that your body is expressing itself in a safety, protection, survival state versus a thriving, purpose, power, faithful, hopeful, optimistic, healing state, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense. So instead of let's remove it, it's let's work with it. Instead of let's bring brute force against it, it's
Yeah.
let's kind of figure out how do we take the imbalance
Mhm.
and make it more balanced,
Yeah.
right? And think about, okay, so I'm curious. This is just maybe from your own story. I'm going to pivot a little bit here,
Sure.
but I think this is really helpful for people to hear. Um, you talked about being a teacher
Mhm.
and realizing in that process you wanted to awaken people, children, students, we'll call it, and you wanted to do it through this avenue, awaken the brain through teaching, so to speak. Is that kind of right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Okay. So here you are doing something completely different, but using a teaching gift.
Yep.
Your purpose, I don't think, and there are many purposes you can have in life, but your purpose didn't really change. The
Not at all.
expression of it did.
100%.
And people forget, they're like, I got to find my purpose. I got to find my purpose. It's in my job. It's good. This, that, the other. And they forget that the expression of your purpose may change as
Yes.
you gain more understanding of how God made you
Mhm.
and how to see yourself like that
Yep.
and live and express yourself like that. So tell me, at what point what were you seeing yourself like when you were teaching? Okay. And what changed in how you saw yourself when you started moving into this expression of your purpose through chiropractic, whole health care?
Yeah, man, there's so many changes in there. This is a great question. And it's so good because it's just touching on identity, which I've just been obsessed with for a lot of different reasons recently. I had a deep conversation about identity today, but we'll get there. So, okay. When I was teaching, I was like, you got to understand, I was the head volleyball coach, avid coordinator, teaching honors classes, kind of doing like pioneering a lot of things with another teacher and I. And so we were just doing a lot of cool stuff. And like I said, I was kind of on the track to go admin, where they're like, "Why don't you go teach other teachers like all this stuff that you know?" So interestingly, even though I was really good at it, I was like the lowest of the low that I'd ever been in my life. And so at that point, like my everything about my identity or what I define success as would have been you go to college, you get a good job, you get to the top of the ladder. But like, I'm like, I have a house, I have a wife, I have a job, I have the promotion. But I was like literally in the darkest place I'd ever been in my life, like addiction, a whole bunch of other stuff. So then I'm like, all right, if I look back on it and I'm like, well, how is that possible? And it's because I kind of believe this lie that like if you do those things, then you'll be successful. And what I realize is like success has nothing to do with what you have or don't have. It's much more, I don't even know, I don't want to say it's a mindset because that makes it sound like it's something we need to strive after or like hustle harder to get. So I don't want to use those words, but it's success is something else, right? And so if we fast forward to today, what has changed definitively is that I know, like, if I never made another dollar in business, if I never helped another person with their nervous system, like, the only thing God wants me to do that I can see at this point is teach people. You said it. I love that you pulled that out of what I've said so far. Teach people about the power that God put in each of us. It's that. And so, like, all of my identity now, I'm like, if I do that, I don't care what else happens because I know my wife's going to love me. I know my daughter's going to love me. I have a father in heaven who's always been faithful to me, even when I actively would say God does not exist. And man, it's like, I don't know how much more free, honestly, you can be than that. And it just so happens that a lot of cool stuff happens in life when you kind of show up that way. Um, so I hope that answers your question, but it's like that's the difference, and it really is just like I don't know what I would call it. It's not a mindset. It's just been an active pursuit of figuring out like what does God say about me and what's the gift that He's given me that's kind of unique that's been woven through every aspect of my life.
Yeah, so in the past, you were maybe thinking, okay, it's more in this expression of like the path that I've taken
Hmm.
versus now you see it, my identity, being more in who I am and how that express will change over time.
Yeah, 100. Yeah, and you said it perfectly. It's like as a teacher, like I got my worth from like how well my kids did, and then like what promotion I was going to get, or what courses I was teaching, or like how many other teachers thought I was awesome and wanted to come see what I was doing in my classroom. It's like all, just about the world. Business early on was the same thing. It's like, how much revenue can we drive? How many people can I see? And it was never like, even though I cared, it was never about like, what are the lives that are being impacted? And like, just again, just living for something out, getting validation from other places other than where I've had validation all along.
Yeah. And I would even add there's nothing wrong with validation from other places so
No.
long as it's not the source of your
Hmm.
success,
Yep.
right? And I mean I even have to remember that myself.
Yeah.
Um, and, one of the things that really stands out to me, especially because when I'm working with people, one of the key, I always have facts and feelings that
Hmm.
are going to be their mile markers of progress. A lot of times people factually are in a better spot than their feelings tell them.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
And so I always kind of outline the facts and feelings of where they are versus where they'd like to be. And then we can understand mile markers of progress, like, hey, where are we? Are we actually still activating in the ways that you believe are going to be progress for you? One of the mile markers and feelings is confidence in particular areas of life, but it's a common one. People who are seen as high performers, high performing professionals, whether it be business owners or wealth advisors or former professional athletes, whoever, or even, in the education space, healthcare space, real estate space, they're seen with a lot of success from the outside in, but they're lacking some of the confidence
Hmm.
within. And one of the mile markers for them of progress is feeling that confidence from the inside out rather than having it come from the validation.
Yeah.
And one of the things that stands out to me in hearing some of the stories from people you've worked with, some of your clients, patients. I'm not sure exactly how you refer to them, but um, regardless, people you're helping, they, one story in particular, they talked about how they told you, and this to me is as clear a day, as clear a signal as day as of a person who's confident from within. Okay. They told you, there's a story that the they weren't really seeing progress. And, "Hey, Dr. Daniel, I've been coming to you for X amount of times or whatever it is, and we've talked and this and that, and you've answered my question. I'm just not seeing progress." And they said that your response was, "I'm open to that. I'm open to that. I'm open to the fact that you're not seeing progress." And from what I understand, you can confirm this if it was, if it's the story you remember, or maybe other stories you've had, but it's, hey, just let's keep going with X, Y, and Z if you want to. And believe me, you're going to see A, B, and C. You're going to start to see things unlock. And does that sound right? Is this ringing a bell?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I know
Yeah.
exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah. And so normally, right, you do, right? You remember people. And they said they couldn't believe some of the things that started to shift in their life, and this was the person I believe where it was the fear changing and them
Hmm.
deciding, "Well, I can make decisions to better myself and go change jobs, change locations, whatever it is." They're like, "Wait a second, where did this come from?"
Yeah.
And to me, the reason I bring that up is because when we're talking about identity, how you see yourself, confidence from within, not validation from others, that to me, the person that you are that can look at somebody and go, "I'm open to that. This is what I do. I'm good at what I do. I've invested more time, energy, resource than you can imagine doing this." You might not be getting results. You're telling it to me, "Hey, I know what results I'm looking for, but your life is your experience, and so I can believe what you're saying."
Mhm.
And somebody who can look at somebody and go, "I'm open to that," and just keep taking steps if you want to. That's somebody who is confident from within. Now, let me ask you, are you the type of person back when you were teaching where if you had somebody coming to you going, "You're just not it, man. You're not doing it the way you teach," would you have had the same response then?
No. No, it probably would have destroyed me for like 2 months where I would have just thought about it and ruminated on it and just beat myself up and told myself the story that I wasn't good enough. Yeah. And there's, it's a journey every day, but I just, the coolest part, the transformation for me really is that I know I've said it and it can sound like beating a dead horse, but it's like I know what God made us capable of. And I trust that so much that it's like you don't have to see results because I know he's working in his timeline. And if I get my small mind in the way, then I put myself in the role of healer. But I'm not. I'm not smarter than like any doctor who's like, I know exactly what's going on with your body because I'm as smart or smarter. Like there are so many processes happening that we try to pretend that we understand, but it's just not, it's too complex. It's too complex.
It's powerful to hear you say that, and the transformation to me sounds like I realized that this is bigger than me,
Hmm.
but I'm still a part of it, a
Yep.
part of this journey called life. I have a role in it. I'm not
100%.
perfect and I'm not asked to be, but I'm going to play my role and trust God with the rest because I've seen it over and over and
Yeah.
over again.
Yes,
That's what I'm
sir.
hearing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have story after story. I've had people sit with me 3 months in and they're like, in 2 weeks, when we do our next progress eval, I'm done. Like I'm out. It's not working. And I'm like, I'm telling you, everything's going to change. And some of those people are still with me today. They're like, I'm just so glad I stuck it out for those next 2 weeks because that's when, like a light switch, and God heals on His timing. But I know, like you said it perfectly. I have a responsibility. We all do. So cool.
Well, I tell people trust the process.
Yep.
But you don't need to trust me in that process
Yeah.
necessarily. Just trust the
Yeah.
process,
Yep.
right? And because today we might have covered something that seemed totally outside the realm of what you think, or maybe we spent time on the phone where you spent 30 minutes actually doing something instead of us talking about it,
Yep.
which I've been known to do, right? It's like, hey, we can talk about this or you can actually do this. And people know, people I've been with, working with
Yeah.
for a long time, they know it's like, okay, I know if I say this, I know exactly what's coming next with TJ. So there's definitely, those times where you go, hey, look, if you just work the process will
Mhm.
work for you.
Yep.
But I can't be responsible for the outcome. Frankly, because I'm not even doing it, right? I'm
Right.
not changing a life, I'm influencing. That's the
Yep.
best I can do.
Yep.
So, it's so funny to hear you say that though. I last thing, and man, we could have this conversation for hours, I already know it, but define success in one word.
Great question. That's a great question. One word. I think I would say fulfillment. Doesn't always mean happy. It doesn't always have to be easy, but just a deep fulfillment.
Well, you're on the right podcast, that's for sure. I read on the homepage of my website, turn empty success into authentic fulfillment. You're in
Oh,
the
let's
right
go.
place. But I mean, and that was my journey is I was completely unfulfilled.
Yep.
And, and I can attest to the fact that it's not always happy. It's not always easy. You can definitely experience suffering and still find fulfillment. In fact, I actually believe suffering and fulfillment are deeply connected
Yeah.
personally when you're able to find purpose out of that place of pain
Yep.
personally.
No,
But
dude, that think about like I had this conversation earlier today. Um, like think about your wedding day. So you have this immense, like your heart is racing. you're watching your bride walk down the aisle, your hands are sweating, you're, like, so nervous. That's no different than, like, if someone showed up and they were just screaming at you and, like, wanted to fight you in a parking lot. You feel the same way. So you're right. It's like physiologically, it's only just this collection of
Crazy.
same hormones. It's just how we interpret that. And I think you spoke to that so well. It's like facts versus feelings, and feelings will lead us astray.
Wow, that is an unbelievable example I've never thought about. Unbelievable, because the wedding hits home for me. I was crying like a baby. I mean, I
Yeah.
was weeping, couldn't even stand.
Yep.
I almost fell over on the floor, I was crying so hard.
Yeah. So, and most emotions are like that, right? Is like
Wow,
like you said, it's like they're not that far apart. It's just the interpretation of the context around them that
wow.
changes them.
Wow,
Yeah.
mind blown. That's amazing. Mic drop on that one. Okay, so Dr. Daniel, how can somebody, if they're listening and they're like, I need to see Dr. Daniel ASAP,
Yeah.
how can they get in touch with you? What's the best thing for them to do and the next step?
Yeah, so best thing would probably be if you want to like see me in practice, go to my website. You can request an appointment online. And my team will get with you like ASAP. If you're interested at all in learning more and just like have questions, you can always DM me on Instagram at Dr. Daniel Kimbley is the easiest way. And I answer all of them 100% of the time and always will. It's so fun to just help and support people wherever I can. So
I love it. I
yeah,
love it. Well, thank you so much for your time today. And I'm sure we're going to be having a lot more conversations, but this was a good one, and I'm glad we had it recorded.
TJ, I appreciate the time and the honor and just the willingness to have me on and have a conversation with you.